We're going to dive right in and we're going to talk about a number of different things. And we're doing this is super basic and generalized. And many of the things that I'm going to tell you, most of the things I tell you, are going to apply to all patterns that have charts. So the first thing I want you to realize is that it really is important. There's a reason that most charts or most patterns in general say, please read all the instructions before you begin. It's just like when you go to bake a cake, you need the right size pan. You need to remember to have eggs. You got to make sure you have the right kind of flour, baking powder or baking soda or whatever, all the stuff. So you got to make sure you have all the right ingredients. And with a pattern, you need to be able to do that too. So what that means is you need to make sure you have the right needles and the right yarn. You understand what all of the stitches mean, whether it's written out or charted. And all of those instructions vary from one designer to another, from one culture to another, from one area of the world to another. And of course, time period, because things have changed a whole lot. So we're going to dive in to my second camera here, and I'm going to show you a very basic chart. Ta-da! I have a little tiny, I should have be hiding in some part of your screen right here. And then down here, there is a chart. So this is an example of a chart that is worked in the round. I'm going to use my little, my double point needle here to be a pointer. I know that this is a chart that's worked in the round because the numbers over here are all up the right-hand side. And also I know it because I read the chart and it said, you're making a cowl, you're making a sweater, you're making a thing that's round. So I know that it's in the round because I know what I'm making. But I also know that I am meant to work on the right side of a project the entire time. The number 1 is a clue that that's where we're going to begin, right? So we know that this is the first round because it's in the round. And we know this is the first stitch. So these numbers down here are stitch numbers. And this little chart goes from 1 to 12. And the rows go from 1 to 6. So this is an example, as I said, it's not a real chart. It is a real chart. It's not a real pattern. So you may begin at the very first stitch on the very first row, which is right here. And there's a dot. We don't know what a dot means. So we need another thing, which is also right here, and it's called the key. It might be called the chart. It might be called a legend. It could be called a few different things, but legend is often key or legend are the two things, or it might be chart key. But you see this dot, and we see a dot right here. So we know that that dot means to purl, and you know how to purl. So this is each box means 1 stitch. So we're going to purl a stitch and we're going to move from right to left. So we're going to go this direction across the row. So we're going to purl 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's no dot, which means we go back to the key and we say, what does this mean? And the key tells us if there's a square that says nothing, it means to knit. So I'll knit 1 and then I purl 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I knit 1. And if this were a repeated pattern, like work this repeat of whatever this pattern is around the entire cowl or hat, you would end at stitch 12 and then return all the way back to the first stitch and repeat it again. So you'd be working this repeat from 1 to 12, this 12 stitch repeat, however many times around your project. So if this weren't if this were a 12 stitch repeat, you could put a little stitch marker here at the end of that repeat to tell you, okay, I reached the end of my little chart. Here's a stitch marker. I should have also used up all of the little stitches from here to here, so now we got to go back. We start over. And if I got to the end of my chart and I had 2 stitches left, before my next little stitch marker, and my stitch markers are 12 stitches apart, then I'd know, heck, I messed up. I made some mistake. And most likely it would be within those last 12 stitches. So putting those stitch markers helps us to catch a mistake fairly quickly, be able to tink back a couple stitches, which isn't fun, but it's not as terrible as undoing, 196 stitches to figure out that you did one thing not what the chart asked you to do or what the instructions said to do. So this is a chart in the round. Again, these are the stitch numbers down here. These are the round numbers. And this is the key or the legend. I think I say key throughout this entire thing. So that is what those are. The chart itself, it gives you the exact, well, it gives you the same information as written instructions, but sometimes a chart is supplemented by some of the written instructions. And it will say things in the written instructions that add to what the graphic part of the chart is. So this chart is in the round. It shows every round, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So away this one goes. Where am I going to throw all my papers? How about down here? And now we're going to look at a chart that has worked flat. So this chart is a piece of ribbing. And if you look at it, we're looking at always, for all of our charts, we're looking at the front of the work. So this is a piece that's worked flat, where you're going to work a knit side and a purl side, or a right side and a wrong side. And so we have our same key. It's been moved over. It's over here now. And the key, where the very first stitch where we're going to begin, there's that dot. We know that this dot on the right side, our S, means purl. So I can purl 2. And now stitch number 3 is a big blank box, which means to knit, right? So I'm going to knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2. Sounds like I'm doing ribbing, which is great. And then we're going to turn our work. And now there's numbers over here on the left side of the chart. And the numbers on the left side of the chart tell us we are on the wrong side of the row. These are rows, not rounds, because we're working back and forth. So here's the row, and we're going to work the wrong side row from left to right. So we're going to go this way. So we're going to go right here to this one here. And I can tell you right now that I am not on the right side of my row, even though this chart, everything that you're looking at is sort of like the front of the painting. But what we got to do is we're going to the back side of the painting, and we're doing stuff from the other direction. This symbol here tells us what to do if we were looking at the front of the painting, the front of the work, right? But we want to do the opposite of this. So we say, okay, I'm on the wrong side now. What do I do? What does this dot mean? So I go back to my key and I say, okay, key, the wrong side stitches with this symbol means to knit. Well, it's the opposite of whatever you did before, generally. So on the wrong side, I'm going to knit if there's a dot. So I'm knitting 2 because I'm on the wrong side. And now I get to a blank square. And I say, well, what does that mean? Big blank square, wrong side means to purl, because the purl stitch is the opposite of the knit stitch. So I'm going to purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, turn my work, and say, oh, I'm doing 2x2 rib. That's what I'm doing. So it's knit 2, purl 2, rib, or purl 2, knit 2, rib in a chart form. Well, that's easy enough. I know what that means. So something to keep in mind when it comes to the, where's page 3? Oh, here we go. Something to keep in mind when it comes to these written charts is each row is, on this case, is numbered, right side, wrong side, right side, wrong side. But sometimes these numbers might be listed all the way up both sides. So it might say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1, 2, so on and so forth. But it will say work flat. So you know to work flat. So you, on the right side rows, which are usually odd numbers, you'll work from right to left. And on wrong side rows, you'll work from left to right. Okay. And then he breathes. Another chart.
Hey, Kyle, can you
Yes.
answer a quick question here?
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a little bit of confusion as to, I think it was the first chart. Were we doing that one in the round?
Oh, okay. Yes, yes, yes.
As to where the second round starts.
Oh, okay. So here is the very first chart we were talking about. This is worked in the round. So this is a 12 stitch repeat. And let's say we've cast on 48 stitches to work in the round. Okay. And that this is some kind of a, whatever the pattern is. So you'll work from right to left always on stitches and that are charts that are in the round. So you purl all these stitches, knit one, purl 5, knit 1, and you repeat that 4 times, right? So you'll work all the way across. After stitch number 12, you might have a marker to separate the two repeats. Go back to the very first stitch on the same round you were on, repeat it again a second time. There'd be a marker, a third time, a marker, and a fourth time, and a marker. And then you are at the end of your round. Then, and the end of round marker, the very first one, the main one that you place, will be unique. You want to be able to see that one for to mark the end of your entire like revolution around your entire piece. So once you get done with that, then you go up to round number 2 and you start working it, and you do exactly the same thing across. There'll be a marker here, back to the first stitch on the second round, and over. So that's how you work it in the round. If it was a flat one, we'll just say it real quick on flat, it's the same deal. So you would work across this piece, and if it was repeated, you might have to repeat the entire thing again. And then once you get to the end of your row, you turn your work around, because you worked at the front of the scarf, you're turning around to work on the back, and you'd work the opposite direction, knowing that you're working the wrong side. So it means that that symbol, that's a little dot, you have to do whatever it says, the WS, the wrong side instructions. RS is right side, WS is wrong side. So that's the working flat back and forth. And this shows you every row. So here's row 1, here's row 2, here's row 3. Okay. So that's just very basic knit and purl reading the chart. You can get a lot of information graphically, and you can see, if you look at this, it looks like bumpy stitches that might be purl stitches, and here are plain ones, bumpy stitches. So it looks kind of like 2x2 rib. So as you're working, you have an idea of what it might need to look like. So then we go to this. So this is a lace chart. It's part of a lace chart. So you see these little dashes up here. That's our just reminder to you that this isn't everything. So here is a lace chart. And on this one, in the handout that you'll get later, it has more information, because there's generally more information than what you see just on the chart. And in this one, and you know that this is the first row, and the instructions say to knit 2 stitches, work row 1 of the chart, which is this, and then knit 2 more stitches. So there are 2 stitches on either side of this chart that aren't depicted in the chart. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. So what you do is you're reading the chart, and you do exactly that. So you're going to knit 2, because that's what the written instructions said. And there might be a marker. I would put a marker there. Then I would work the first stitch of the chart, which is a yarn over. So you're going to yarn over, and then you work the last 2 stitches. There'd be a marker here too. So a marker on either side. And we know this is a yarn over because the symbol is over here. So then you need to go to row number 2, which would be listed over here, right? There'd be a number over here, because we know that the wrong side rows go the opposite direction. There should be numbers over here, but they're nowhere to be found. But you're not panicking, because you read your instructions on the chart, and you know that all of the wrong side rows are knit 2, purl to the last 2 stitches, and knit 2. So those first and last 2 knit stitches are just going to be garter stitch, and you're just purl back. So in lace knitting, quite often the wrong side row, we call them resting rows, and you just purl back. So you don't have to worry about all of the symbols and any of it. You just, half of it is a purl project. So half your project is done just with purl stitches. Easy peasy. So if we jump all the way up to here, row number 9, there's a couple knit stitches. You'll slip this marker, and then there's a yarn over, which wasn't here before. You see the marker was here. So once you slip that marker, there's not a stitch here. So you see how it's growing. This piece is growing with this yarn over. So the yarn over adds a stitch. Then you knit a stitch, which is the one right here. And then you'll yarn over, which is a added stitch. And then you do this little slanty piece, which is right here, SSK, which is a decrease. So a yarn over adds a stitch, a SSK, or this is a knit 2 together. Those are decreases. They take away 1 stitch. And there are more ways to increase and decrease, of course. But these two balance each other out. They sort of cancel each other out. This one makes 1 stitch. This takes 1 away. So if they are next to each other, or even in the same row, they cancel each other out. The piece would be rectangular. But if you have more little round yarn overs, that would add a stitch. And if you had more of these little slants, the SSKs and the knit 2 togethers, that would decrease the number of stitches in a row. So this chart only shows the right side rows, and it is worked flat. So the flat rows are mostly purled. You'll do whatever the instructions say to complete it. So another thing to just note about this one is this key has symbols, K, and then it says sort of what the K means. Knit, SSK is slip 2 stitches, knitwise, then knit them together through the back loop. That's how you SSK. A YO, yo, is a yarn over. So this one has the description of what the term means as well. If it wasn't there, you might have to refer to the knitting abbreviations for whoever wrote the pattern. You can also always look at the abbreviations. Like we have a series of abbreviations as well, which you can certainly refer to for our patterns. And they're down at the bottom on our website. We have a knitting one and a crochet one.
There's one more question that might help out Judith before you continue. And that is, she's left-handed.
Okay.
And she has a question, as she says, I don't know whether to follow the chart backwards or photocopy and mirror image.
The mirror image. So I see that. So Judith, I believe that if you can read written instructions, you should be able to read this as well, because how you're knitting is one thing, right? Because you're knitting left-handed, and people think, well, I have 2 hands and I knit with both. Yes, but people who knit left-handed are holding their yarn, the working yarn, in their left hand and sort of throwing or picking opposite. They're doing the opposite of what most of us probably do. So the stitches are created backwards. So I get you. I understand what you're saying. And in this chart, for example, you would follow the chart in the same direction that we would follow the chart, but you're going to make the stitches however you normally make your stitches. So you may be producing the work in a different direction on your needles, but the chart itself doesn't need to be flipped. So this is another example of a chart that's flat. So you see these are right side rows. Here's row number 1 that will be worked this way. And row number 2 is worked the opposite direction. But there's this giant red box in the middle of the chart. which is here. And this is it's called a repeat, usually, like a repeat section. And this is 6 stitches across and 6 rows high. So these 36 stitches, we're going to repeat them over and over and over and over to make a bigger piece. And you can see the stitch numbers go from 1 to 12. And then these might end like number 30. So this might have said cast on 30 stitches. Or it might, instead of that, it might say 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, because it just depends on how the designer or the person who did the layout for the pattern, it could be anything. What's important is that you know that you're going to work across a series of stitches. The very first stitch that you work is right here, right? And you're going to follow the key, which is down here. So you're going to purl 1, knit 1, there's the knit stitch, purl, knit, and then you will encounter this red box. And this red box is the repeat. And the written instructions will tell you how many times to repeat this, this section. So we would repeat this the way that it's written here, I believe, 3 times. So we'll go across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 knit stitches. And then that's 1 repeat. Then we'll go back to here and repeat it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 2. And then 1 more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so we're done with the repeat. We can get out of there and move on here. So then you do the last little section, purl, knit, purl, knit. And then you would turn your work and head back the opposite direction. This time you're working on the wrong side of the chart, right? The other side of the painting. So we're looking at this chart facing the front of the work. And we know that this square, it's the opposite of whatever it was facing the right side. So the wrong side is a purl stitch. So I'll purl, knit, knit, because I'm on the wrong side. Get into my repeat. I will repeat it 1, all the way back, 2, 1 more time, the 3rd time, and then complete my row to the end. And then I'd move to row number 3. So that's what a repeat box does. Super fun. And you're gonna find those again. They will come back to us. So this looks like 2, like ribbing, right? It looks like a knit 2, but the key doesn't say knit. So how do I know that those are knit stitches? So this is my gentle reminder to you that just because designers are good at designing in general and people are good at publishing, sometimes things are not always, everything may not be on the chart. It might not always say, like sometimes it doesn't say, like when you're finished with the yarn, to cut the yarn, leave a 6-inch tail, weave it in later. You just kind of have to figure it out that you're done with that color. Maybe you need to cut the yarn and be done with it. So in this case, we know that the little dot is a purl stitch. We know that we're working in the round because all the round numbers are here on the right, and we know that we're working from right to left. So that's almost enough information to just take a stab at assuming that these are knit stitches. Also, in your instructions, you will know, like if this was for a hat, for example, you're going to cast on however many stitches, and it will say work in 2-color rib, 2 by 2, 2-color rib until the work measures whatever, 1.5 inches. So you know that knit 2, purl 2, rib has 2 knit stitches, right? So we know to knit 2 stitches with C1. C1 means color 1. So, and then C2 would be color 2. And if there were multiple colors in this project, there'd be C3, C4, C5. And those numbers are supposed to be sequential in order of appearance. So the very first, so you probably would have cast on with this yellow, knit 2 stitches with yellow. Stitch number 3 and 4 are done in purple, and you're going to purl. So purl 2 with purple, knit 2 with yellow, purl 2 with purple, knit 2 with yellow, and off you go. It's clear, right? And what's cool is you can see that it's a 2 by 2. It should make vertical stripes in color. And you can see that these are the purl stitches. So they are probably the purl bumps. Well, they are, because that's what purl stitches do. And you can see that there's a difference in the color. So there are a lot more color charts showing up because people have print at home capabilities to print things in color. And also we have digital ways of, like Knit Companion or Knit Trino or whatever. There's different ways to carry our color charts around with us and be able to follow through with them. Often you'll find that these are colored in a way that either approximates the colors of the yarns that were used in the sample, or they will be colored in fairly neutral tones to try to keep things in your brain a little bit more calm, so you can remember that I'm not using yellow, I'm using, orange, and I'm not using purple, I'm using brown. So I have to remember that. So as you're working, if you are unable to recolor the chart, sometimes you can do that, using different things. If this is actually orange, I might just write orange, and I'd write brown to remind myself that this color is really brown, because I would refer to the chart to remind myself. And after I do it a little bit, I'll be like, oh, I will get it. Because also once you've done a couple rounds of this, you know that these stitches are stacking on top of each other, right? The other thing, so I'll give a break from this giant it's not a PowerPoint, it's just a camera to show you me again. Hi, here I am. The other thing I want to tell you about the way colors are specified in patterns. So we've talked about C1, C2, C3, that kind of thing, color 1, color 2. Those are the colors appearing in order of appearance. Another way that charts or patterns can tell you what colors and multiple colors of yarns in one pattern is main color and contrasting color. So the main color is not necessarily the dark color or the light color, and it's not necessarily the color of the pattern or the dominant color. Color dominance is something totally different than whether the yarn is light or dark. The main color is the one you use more of in the project, and that's it. So it might be that you need 2 hanks of the main color and 1 hank of the contrasting color to make the project. That's not always the case in the way that people write their patterns, but that's the way that it should be. So just be aware of how they're named. But the main color, contrasting color doesn't mean light or dark, and it doesn't mean the dominant color or the non-dominant color. Those are things that we can talk about another time. Oh, look, another red square. Well, you know what that means. This is a colorwork chart, and it doesn't have a key, but the handout will have a little key, so it'll show you, it'll say teal and white or main color and contrasting color. And what I wanted you to see in this is you're working 1 stitch here in this dark color, and then you're repeating this section over and over and over and over until you get to the end of however many repeats need to be done, right? And then you finish this. So it would say in the instructions, work that repeat 5 times or whatever. And then you finish with the last stitch here. Now this happens to be worked in the round, and you will know that not because of the way the numbers are, because sometimes the numbers are on both sides of the chart. They might be on both sides, but this is worked in the round. You know that because you're making a hat or you're making a cowl or whatever it is. It's something in the round. So once you get to the end here, you will go back to the beginning of round number 2, work the first light stitch, and then you enter that repeat section again, and you'll repeat it however many times. So 3 dark, 1 light, 1, 2 dark, and then you need to repeat it again. So dark number 3, dark number 4, dark number 5, right? Because you end up doing 5 dark stitches, 1 light, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, until you get to the end of it, and then you do 1, 2 dark stitches, and then you can like finish your repetition and zip over here and do that last one in the round, and then you'd move on to round number 3. So why would we not just put all of that information? Why would we not just repeat this over and over? Well, you know, like print it all out on one big long thing. Then it sort of becomes the same as the very long sentence that the written instructions might say. I want to show one more thing on this one, which is at the very end of these 8 rounds, we're going to do one more round, which is repeat round number 1. And that would be written down in the instructions. So that would bring this little border, and it would put that border up at the top. So that is very basic why we do repeats in color work. We're getting there. We're getting there. So, all right. So we're going to talk about shaping in charts. So we talked about in the lace project, we talked about decreasing and how decreasing, if you do a knit 2 together or an SSK, whichever one leans which way, I always have to look at the chart to figure out which is which. And you balance it with a yarn over or another increase, single increase, decrease 1, increase 1, they balance each other out, everything stays straight, right? Well, in this case, I have some symbols here, and you can kind of see, it's sort of hard to read the darker ones, but they're exact, the 2 dark blue ones are the same as these 2, which is this blue one with this symbol means knit 2 together, just like the gray one with the symbol means knit 2 together. The gray just happens to be the contrasting color. And this one means SSK when it leans here, which is slip 1 knitwise, slip another knitwise, put them back on the left-hand needle, knit them through the back loop. So when there's a line going this way and it's blue, like right here, we do an SSK, and that eats 2 stitches. So I'm going to, I'll use this. I just finished that row of some knitting. So here's some knitting right here. And I just finished that row. So I'm going to go up one more row. And the thing that I like to use for my, where is it? To hold my projects is this little magnetic board. It's just a magnetic board. It's from a company called Loran, L-O-R-A-N. We have them in the shop, and they are wonderful because you put this thing on here, and you stick the magnets on, and you can read your chart and know where the heck you are without worrying about what's in the future. You're only worried about what's going on right now. So I'm going to back up my desk. So I just finished. This is just a little swatchy swatch. It is not all of the stitches, but I went across this row, and now I'm going to go up to the next row of stitches and get my yarn over here. And I'm starting right at this section here. So I'm going to be reading these instructions as I go. And I knit 2-handed. So I'm going to knit 2 with the light color, right? Because it's right there. And now 2 with the dark color. So I will pick those. 1, 2. and then 2 with the light color. So I'm going to throw those. And they don't wrap each other. They don't twist, none of that. And then 2 dark, right? That's where I am. And then 2 light. And now I need to do 2 more dark knit stitches. 1, 2. And then the next one here has this little line leaning this way. There it is. And it says knit 2 together. So I'm going to knit 2 together. And that took away this stitch, because there was a stitch here. These are the 2 that I just knitted together to go here. This black square might just be it might not be printed at all. Sometimes people are kind to you, kind to your ink, and they just don't have anything there, and it's just a big giant white space. But in this case, it's black. Sometimes they're dark gray, and it just says no stitch. That means you just ignore it. You move to here, and it needs to be white or gray. It's going to go into this column, and good for me, because that's the next stitch. It's a gray stitch. So I just decreased 1 right there. And there's another stitch that says, don't worry about me. So I'm going to look at this one, and it leans that way, which is right here. And it's an SSK. So I will SS and K, which is another decrease. And then knit 2 of the blue, 1, 2, 2 gray, 2 blue, and 1 gray, because that's how long my little number of cast on stitches were. And so that is kind of what that little bit would look like. Okay, like that. I want to show you I'll show you 2 more things real quick. One is this. So here's the exact same chart, and I'm going to chop it up. I'm just going to cut along all of those decreases, and I'm going to cut. So I'm taking out the no stitches. Get rid of this part. It's craft time. I'm going to do the same kind of thing, and I'm just going along most of these little stitches here to give myself an idea of what that looks like. Away goes those. And I'm going to take a piece of tape to sort of hold my things together. So all of these stitches that are not on the chart, I'm going to just squish this way to give you an idea of what it might look like. And I'm going to do the same thing on here. This is just to give you an idea of how the chart is starting to shape the hat. But if the chart was printed like that, it'd be a lot more difficult to see, right? Because it goes and turns the corner and goes up. So that's why the chart has these stitches here that mean no stitch. And what this is, get you out of the way, get you out of the way, and you out of the way. This is an example. This is this pattern. So you can see that right here. Come on, there you go. Right here is the gray stitches, the gray column of stitches. And right here is this blue stitches that are being decreased as they go, and blue stitches that are being decreased as they go. And like right here is probably like right about there that you can't see on the pattern. So we're doing crown shaping. And that is what that is. And it makes, at the end, it ended up making a crown that looks kind of like that. This is a cable pattern, which I can swoosh down a little bit more, give you a little bit of a better view. This is a cable pattern. We know that it is worked flat because we see the right side rows have numbers that are every other, and the wrong side rows are every other. And we have a key that has information about how to do each of the stitches. You already know how to read the chart for the most part. So we get all the way to this symbol, and this symbol uses up 2 squares worth of information. So we know right away that this cable, because you know that's what a cable symbol looks like in this chart, and cable symbols can look different everywhere. We know that this is a 1x1 cable cross, and if we find that one on our key, it'll say slip 1 stitch onto cable needle, hold in front, knit 1, and knit 1 from the cable needle. That's what CN means. And we can see that the stitch that we first encounter is still up in front of our of the other stitch. So we know that this is going to be held in the front because of the way it looks on the symbol. And the more that you look at the cable charts, the easier they are to see. But you know that for this one, you slip this stitch onto a cable needle, hold it in front of your work, you knit this stitch, which is behind that one, and then this one gets pulled back up and completed. So this stitch goes from here to here, it changes the order of the stitches. And then you work across, and this is a different one, but we'll get back to it in a second. And then on the wrong side row, you work back, and generally they are just knit and purl stitches if the designer is kind to you. Because remember, whatever you see on the chart is sort of like the front of the painting. You need to do math to figure out how to do it from the back side of the painting or the back side of the work, because you got to go around to the other side. So if you had a cable on a wrong side row, you just need to pay special attention to it, because sometimes they are spelled out differently. Then you get to the third row, and we'll talk about this in a second, because I want to look at this one and then this one. So this one, we had the very first stitch held in the front on a cable needle. And this looks almost the same, except for this one leans to the left. This one is leaning to the right. And that first stitch is sneaking under. It's like it's going under an overpass or something. So the first stitch on this cable would be held to the back of your work, knit 1 stitch, which goes up here. So now you've knitted 1 stitch, and then you knit the 1 stitch from the cable needle that was held in the back of your work, and it orders the 2 yarns in the opposite direction. So if we look at this column, you can see that the ones that are sitting on top of like the bridges or whatever, it kind of goes like this. And it's going to make this S curve sort of thing. So you can start to see it in a chart. In written instructions, it's not quite as visual. So when you get to this big guy, this is a 6-stitch cable. You can see that it takes up 6 stitches. And you know, even just by looking at it without reading what's down here, but you can read it. Slip the first 3 stitches onto your cable needle and hold them in front. And you know that because this is the very first stitches you encounter are still up on top at the end. So you hold them in front, knit these 3 stitches, which end up living over here now, and then knit the 3 stitches from your cable needle. So it makes a 3-stitch over 3-stitch cross, a big giant cross. And usually when it's a bigger cable like this, it takes more rows or rounds of working plain before you do that again, because it takes a lot of it stretches the yarn a lot to do that big cross. If it's just 1 stitch, 1 needle over, or 1 stitch over 1 stitch, it doesn't take as much. So you can do it a little more quickly, more frequently. The last one that's on here is exactly the same all 4 times that we see on this chart. It has this little polka dot here. And that is, it says slip 1 onto the cable needle, hold it in front. That's just like we did here. Slip one on the cable needle, hold it in front. And then it says purl one. And that's what that little dot means. So you're going to purl the stitch, the next stitch, it's over here. So it gets purled, and then knit the one from the cable needle. So these are kind of going over, and then it's going to go up and across, and it's going to kind of go under and disappear here and become a purl stitch. So it sort of terminates because it's going to terminate into all these purls. So this is going to kind of like make a curvy curve here, and then another curve and another curve. So it's like half of a braid, sort of. Okay. The last one is essentially the same as what I just showed you, except this is all worked in the round. And you know that because all of these stitch numbers are on the right-hand side. And when you're working in the round, you can put a cable, or a cable can exist on any of the rounds because they are all working on the right side of the fabric, right? If you look at something that's worked in the round, you can think of it as like the label on a soup can. You only see the outside of it all the way around. You can turn it around and look at it on the outside, and that's what you see. All these stitches only have one meaning. The polka dots mean purl. No, anything in here means knit. The big giant thing is that 6-stitch cable. So this would be a cable that wraps around itself with a column. So there's 1, 2, and then you would keep going 3. So 3 stitches in a row of purl stitches. So those would be little purl columns with a big giant cable in the middle. I'm sure you have more questions. I want to show you just like 2 more things. One of them is highlighter tape. So I have, this is highlighter tape. And I'm going to grab just a piece of it. I shouldn't have changed my thing, but I will just bring it up and show you. So I just stuck a piece of highlighter tape on this chart. And the highlighter tape can be repositioned really easily. So you can pick it off. I usually fold the edge of it under, but it can be lifted, repositioned, and put in place really easily. And if everything falls, the tape doesn't move. So it's easy to keep track. Once I complete a round or a row, I usually make a little mark on my charts. I like paper charts. Not everyone does. And I use stitch markers. So of course, here are some stitch markers. We have these folks in our shop. These are non-removable stitch markers. So they are solid rings. They don't come off. What that means is if you get on a project and you get through and you realize that marker is in the wrong place, you can't move it until you get to that stitch again. So we have removable stitch markers. They look like, here are some, there's lots of different kinds, but we have these, we call them rainbow locking stitch markers, and we have them in different colors. So you can choose whatever color you like. I think it's really helpful to have colors that are complementary or easy to see against whatever fabric you're making. So if you're working with all blue yarn, having orange stitch markers is great because you can see them. These are repositionable. So if you're doing something like lace, remember sometimes when you knit 2 together and have a yarn over it, those 2 balance each other out. Sometimes in lace, the lace grows and shrinks and the repeats change order, or like change how many stitches are there. So sometimes you have to move those markers around. So having removable stitch markers is good for that. You can also mark a row or round, like just put it in the fabric and then keep going. And then you can count from there how many stitches up it is. That's how many rows it has been. Any other questions before you get your graduation certificates? No. Okay. So, all right. Well, I am really glad that you're here. I hope that this helped to make it a little bit easier, but the real takeaway is if you want to do something, you can do anything you want to do. Knitting is not hard. You just have to do a little bit of reading when you get your pattern and study your pattern. And usually most of the information is there. If for some reason that it's not clear, you can use Ravelry as a tool. You can look at people who've already made the project and see, you can sort their projects by the ones that are the most helpful. They'll say helpful on them. And sometimes there might be errata, because we're all human, we make mistakes, and that's okay. It is really useful, though, for people to learn from the mistakes and turn them into lessons. So if you mess something up, figure out how you can fix it, and then share with other people how you fixed it, because that's how we all grow as a group. Yeah, Ravelry is a really good one. And then, of course, if you're unfamiliar with a technique, like you want to do cables, for example, sign up for a Learn How to Do Cables class and take that, become familiar with it, and practice, and allow yourself to become proficient before you dive into your designing your own Aran sweater or knitting a house cozy out of cables or whatever it is that you're wanting to do. So anyone else have questions? Otherwise, I'm going to go check on my cat. I'm going to make some dinner. I'm going to watch, Law and Order. I'm going to knit on the hat of the month for next month. So if you are subscribing to that, I'm working on it right now, and it's super cute. And I think that's it. So have a wonderful, wonderful evening wherever you are. Take care of yourself. And we will see you, I guess, on Friday in the newsletter. So, all right. Bye, everyone.